Good morning. I will, if it's okay, all right, we're good. I will call the TRPA Transportation Committee meeting to order. It's 9:38 and on November 19th, 2025, we'll first go to our roll call. Madam Clerk.
Miss Bennett?
Yes, this is Deputy Rachel Bennett for the Secretary of State, Francisco Aguilar.
Mr. Bass?
Here.
Miss Hayes? Miss Hill?
Here.
Mr. Henigman?
Here.
Madam Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you so much. We'll now go to the remote and in-person meeting rules. Remote committee members, please raise your hand to speak and mute your microphone unless speaking to help cut down on background noise. And I'd like to ask that all remote members turn on your camera, and remote members may not use the chat box to make comments or sidebar conversations. If you're viewing the webinar on a personal computer, please ensure your microphone and speakers are turned off to prevent feedback. Members of the public who have joined us in person, please raise your hand at the appropriate time for public comment and you'll be called on to speak. Committee members who are in person, please raise your hand if you wish to comment, state your name, speak clearly into the microphone in front of you. If you're viewing the webinar on a personal computer, please make sure your microphone and speakers are turned off to prevent feedback. First item on our agenda is the public comment period for any items listed on the agenda. Any member of the public wishing to address the committee on agenda items, please raise your hand now, either in person or by clicking the raise hand button on the bottom of your Zoom screen or dialing *9 on your phone. You'll be called on and unmuted by a TRPA staff member. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. This comment period is reserved for items on the agenda. Comments on other matters may be redirected to the public interest comment period before adjournment of the meeting. And are there any folks in person who would like to make public comment? Welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks, Gavin Feiger, Lead to Save Lake Tahoe. A couple things on the regional grant, kind of a couple of items. Regional grant program, like great recommendations. We fully support those, and really excited to see the Greenway getting creative with the STIP funding to really put some money down on the Greenway and make that happen over Johnson Meadow. On VMT, this has been a huge one for a lot of years, and it's kind of a small crowd right now. I didn't send in written comments, but I did jot down some notes talking with the team. So this was supposed to be finished this year, really close. So really close. So good enough on timing. Three, basically, I have two things, two specifics I'd like to note, and then one big picture, maybe omission, I'll note it. Specifically the local serving businesses for screening. We talked about this a lot in like circa 2020. And there was discussion around a 10,000 square foot screening threshold. And then there was kind of just too much. It was too hard to negotiate around, so we just left it out. So it's back now, which I think is a good idea. 10,000 square feet seems appropriate. The 20,000 square feet in town centers seems high. Maybe something like 15,000 square feet, just dial it back a little bit in town centers. For example, League to Save Lake Tahoe, our new office is 5,000 square feet and it's big and it's in a town center. So 4 times that size would be screened out. Seems large even in a town center. For the 5-year credit, a little more thought needs to go into this, but for direction today, we'd encourage you not to just get rid of it, but likely go for, I think it was option 4. Option 4, which basically achieves the most goals. You get your full 5 years, and then town centers are basically left out. And then the big omission is just back to this whole funding thing, the 777 idea, which was incorporated into the RTP this year. So that's great, but there's no like pressure to make that continue to happen. And then all these VMT changes really do achieve a lot of goals as far as encouraging the local jurisdictions to create more low VMT areas, so walkable, transit-friendly areas. But what's left out is the regional piece and the ongoing funding. So one of the big goals of VMT threshold was to establish this regional funding source that's sustainable and we can plan around. And like, while, no threshold and no plan or policy can achieve everything, that's like the one missing piece from this is there's no real there's no incentive to continue the pressure for everybody coming together for funding, and especially the regional funding. So our two corridors, East and West Shore corridors in particular. So sorry for the long comments, but on those two items, that's it. So
They
thank
were
you.
great, and you were within 3 minutes. So good job. Any other in person? Okay, we will now go to online. Do we have any folks online?
Madam Chair, we have one hand raised so far.
Great.
Helen Neff, you can address the committee.
Hi, Helen Neff, Incline Village resident. Agenda item 4 allocates 11.5 million in federal funding for submitted projects. My question is simple: where was NDOT? The staff report says they were invited, but who from TRPA actually communicated to NDOT the importance of long identified safety projects on State Route 28 through Incline Village? Who encouraged them to apply for funds for these life-saving improvements? On November 12th, we suffered another tragic pedestrian crash, this time resulting in a fatality. My condolences to the family. I too was struck as a pedestrian in the same area a few years ago. I survived, but will never be fully recovered. I know firsthand how dangerous the Incline Village Main Street is. The TRPA Connections 2050 plan adopted earlier this year highlights the need for safety improvements in Incline Village. It joins an extensive list of other studies, the 24 Active Transportation Plan, the 24 Vision Zero Plan, the 23 Washoe County Transportation Plan. I can go on. The reports go back as far as 2012, and who knows, maybe even further. And yet no meaningful safety improvements have been implemented. TRPA and Washoe County continue to focus on prioritizing development code changes to allow for more height and density, yet there is no comparable urgency to fix the long-known safety deficiencies that density will only worsen. We are told that taller buildings and greater density will create a walkable town center, but walkability is impossible when basic safety improvements remain only words in glossy reports. Lives can be saved now with simple, quick build, low cost solutions. Lower the speed limit to 25 miles per hour. Add leading pedestrian intervals. Upgrade the yellow flashing crosswalk beacons to flashing red. Install four-way stops on Village at Northwood and Southwood to slow the traffic approaching State Route 28. Consolidate the driveways. You can use temporary barriers. And repaint and provide sufficient width for the bicycle lanes, especially in front of Rayleigh's. How many more people must be injured or killed before action is taken? Instead of repeating the need for State Route 28 safety improvements in reports year after year, please take action to ensure that NDOT initiates these long-planned safety projects without further delay or excuses. People's lives are at stake. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, there are no other hands raised to make public comment.
Thank you. We'll now close our public comments. And we'll move on to the approval of the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda?
Madam Chair, there are no changes, but I would like to take a moment to explain how we set up the agenda.
Wonderful.
So you're going to see kind of from soup to nuts how projects get selected and paid for. So our item on the regional grant program, we'll talk about how we've solicited projects and used those funds that we have to work with our partners to identify what are priorities and where we can find other funds. You'll then see the Regional Transportation Improvement Program, which is a requirement that we have as MPO to submit. And it takes projects, including those from the regional grant program. So you'll see the projects you're talking about today in the regional grant program and future tips. And then we're going to talk about what Gavin gave us comments on, which is the whole policy framework and way we measure impacts and fund the new development part of these projects. So we hope it's a useful set of items for you. We don't have a lot of time. Most of it will be with Dan Segan talking about the policy things, but just wanted to give you that, tell you the agenda didn't change, but how we tried to make it hang together. So I won't need to introduce those items when we get to them.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, may I just add to that? And I appreciate the opportunity to jump in after Mr. Hester. Julie Reagan here, TRPA's Executive Director. I just wanted to thank the commenters and reassure the members of the public of just what sense of urgency from TRPA staff's perspective that we feel around safety. And our role as an MPO actually has safety considerations embedded within it. And it flows into that policy framework that Mr. Hester just mentioned, that the urgency is not only to achieve our requirements under the compact and our regional plan and our regional transportation plan and getting the funding for the project. We all share that sense of urgency, but it's also a safety imperative. So I just want to ensure the public that, from the highest levels of our staff's perspective, like we are really concerned about safety on the roadways. There was just a World Remembrance Day on the South Shore. Our very own Michelle Glickert spoke at that, honoring those that we've lost on our roadways in recent years. We feel like there has been this uptick. There has been in a lot of places around the country. So just appreciate the comments and wanted to reassure the public that we do have a sense of urgency to find the funding to get these projects on the ground. We're making a lot of progress. And then I wanted to thank the chair of the TTD board, Tahoe Transportation District Board, and the executive director who are here in the audience that I know also share those concerns. And NDOT does have a seat as an ex officio member of the Tahoe Transportation District Board, and they have the authority to address speed limits and things of that nature. Just wanted to clarify that as we dive into the meeting. Thank you for the chance to do that.
Thank you. And I know we're not agendized to talk about it, but I do think that that public commenter brought up a lot of legitimate concerns for us to consider, especially on the Nevada side of the world. So thank you very much. I will deem the agenda approved as posted, and then we'll move on to the minutes. This is item 3 and page 25 of your packet. Do any committee members want to make a change? Not seeing any. Great. May I have a motion, please, for the minutes? Thank you so much. We have a motion. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say nay. And that passes unanimously. Thank you very much. We'll now move into our 2025 Regional Grant Program Recommendations Briefing. This is on page 169 of your packet. We'll turn it over to Mr. Hester again.
We can go right to the staff who are presenting because I gave my spiel during the agenda.
Welcome.
Thank you. So good morning, Chair Hill and committee members. Judy Weber, TRPA Transportation Implementation. So as you mentioned, I'm going to do a presentation on the Regional Grant Program recommendations. So next slide, please. So the 2025 Regional Grant Program, it's in its 6th cycle this year. So it's been 12 years, which is pretty amazing. TRPA, as the Metropolitan Planning Organization, receives formulaic federal and state apportionments that provide funding for transportation activities. One of our primary responsibilities as the MPO is to allocate these funds to priority projects within the region. We do this through the Regional Grant Program via a competitive process every 2 years. Eligible applicants include the City of South Lake Tahoe, the 4 counties, El Dorado, Placer, Washoe, and Douglas, transit agencies, and the state DOTs that are in the region. Eligible activities do differ based on the specific funding sources in the cycle, but typically they can include highway, local road improvements, safety improvements, transit operations and capital, and active transportation, which is mainly bike and ped facilities. The Regional Grant Program supports the Connections 2050 Regional Transportation Plan, goals and policies, and it prioritizes the implementation of the regional and local priority projects. The program's goal is to fund projects that create additional transportation options, connect transit and trails, improve safety, and reduce vehicle miles traveled. Next slide, please. So the grant program is made up of various state and federal funding. We combine these sources into one competitive call for our partners. This helps with efficiency and saves time. And through the grant process, we can also select projects for other funding that may come available within the region. So this cycle, we had 4 funding programs. You can see them up there on the left-hand side. First one, congestion mitigation and air quality program. It's a source in California that provides for projects that improve air quality. Surface transportation block grant. This is our main funding source. It's the most flexible and can be used for a variety of activities in California and Nevada, transportation activities. Then we have the carbon reduction program. Again, the source is in California and Nevada, available in both. And it supports projects that reduce transportation carbon emissions. And then last, we had the Nevada TAP, which is the Transportation Alternatives Program. And this supports projects like active transportation and safe routes to school in Nevada. This cycle, we received $13.9 million in funding requests, and we were able to fund $11.4 million with the total funds available in the cycle, and that's for federal fiscal years 27 and 28. Next slide, please. So we use a comprehensive solicitation and review process for the grant program. It starts with updating the program material. We aligned it with our recently adopted regional transportation plan goals and policies, of course, updated the funding sources, and incorporated feedback from our prior grant cycle. We released the call for projects to our partners on August 1st, notifying them of the funding opportunity, and then we closed it on September 15th. We received 7 applications requesting a total of, again, the $13.9 million and exceeded the available funding by about $2.4 million. Staff pre-screened the applications for eligibility and discrepancies and followed up with the applicant depending on what if there were clarification needs prior to the evaluation process. We used an internal cross-departmental evaluation team to review and score the applications. This was based on the project evaluation criteria, performance assessment, and the points matrix that was established in the guidelines. Scores were compiled and applications ranked based on the total points. And then the team met to review and select projects based again on the total points and the ranking. And out of that, we had 6 projects that were selected for funding available through the program. Next slide, please. So the chart here shows the funding recommendations. Again, 6 of the 7 applications were recommended. We had 3 capital projects, improvement projects, and 3 transit service enhancements. On the capital side, we have the South Tahoe Greenway Upper Truckee River Bridge at Johnson Meadow. This is the 4th phase of the Greenway located in the core of South Lake Tahoe. It will construct 1.2 miles of shared use path, replace the bridge over the Upper Truckee River, and providing active transportation users a safe and critical link to residential, recreation, and community areas. It also will remove pedestrians and bicyclists off Highway 50, giving that link in between that area. And then this project will be fully funded with additional funding that will be presented in the next item that John referred to. So then on the East Shore, we have the SR 28 Sand Harbor to Thunderbird Cove Trail Transit and Safety improvements. You heard about this last governing board from Jim Marino from TTD. We're continuing to invest in the SR 28 corridor. The project will construct 1.7 miles of shared use path between Sand Harbor and Thunderbird Cove, add Vista pullouts and safety improvements. The last one for capital is on the North Shore, Tahoe City Complete Streets, Grove Street Intersection Improvement Project. This will provide improved pedestrian safety and circulation at SR 28 and Grove Street, which is needed. And it also will include signalization and accessibility upgrades. This project also is supported and co-funded by Caltrans. And then for transit services, we have 3. So we have the Free to the User Transit Program. This will continue free fare service on the South Shore on Route 50 and 55 and paratransit services. Then we have Route 51 evening service, providing Thursday through Saturday, 9 p.m. to 12 a.m. evening service from State Line to the South Lake Tahoe Y. This will serve the workforce and events, special events or events in the State Line area. And then the Emerald Bay Transit and Parking Management Project. We were pleased to be able to support this project. providing seasonal transit between South Lake Tahoe and Sugar Pine State Park with a stop at Emerald Bay, and also improve the corridor parking management and enforcement. We did have one application that was not recommended for funding. The project did score below the funding line and was not recommended for this cycle. However, the project is currently in preliminary planning stage as a Caltrans existing grant, and we fully anticipate the project will be submitted in the next cycle. Next slide, please. And so the next steps for the grant program are staff will prepare their grant agreement between TRPA and the recipient, the award recipient. And basically it lays out the requirements and instructions for the project award and the authorization of funds. Once that happens, the recipient will update the project in the Lake Tahoe transportation tracker. And this triggers in the programming of the funds in the Federal Transportation Improvement Program. Once the project funds are programmed, it will allow the project to move forward with the authorization of funds and the work to proceed. So that's what we have for our regional grant program. Thank you, and I'm ready to answer any comments or questions.
Very exciting projects on the list here. So I'll open it up to committee members. Mr. Honigman, do you have anything?
I was just curious for Ms. Neff and others who have specific projects that are interested in, I guess, what is the pathway to get something done? I mean, we get grants and we can only do projects we get money for, so it's not always up to us, but to get a project like that moving forward faster and get it to the top, what has to happen?
Yeah, I think with any capital projects, you know, they take some planning and some time, but in order to get those on the radar of various agencies like NDOT, I think, you know, TRPA has regular conversations with NDOT about safety and safety concerns. And the latest incline incident definitely elevated that with us, and we're going to bring that up with NDOT. We have the same conversations with the 28 and US 50 intersection as well. So there's definitely some places that we've had very focused conversations with NDOT about really getting those projects queued up and in the pipeline, so to speak, because the regional grant program is not the only opportunity to fund and advance those projects. The DOTs have safety money that they need to spend in our region that we want to make sure is making a difference.
But I think to Mr. Honigman's point there, I mean, I have that frustration as well. I commissioned a study that actually calls for all the things that Ms. Neff requested. It's the Washoe Tahoe Transportation Plan. So there has been efforts and study put into this. I'm not saying we need to take away from any of these recommendations, but I understand that frustration. It's palpable for me. And I've been trying to push NDOT to raise these as priorities. I think I was going to look up the timeline that NDOT had put on some of these Washoe Tahoe transportation priorities. And I think we've passed some of the dates that they were supposed to be considered as part of the capital improvements. So there's a major frustration because the county doesn't have the funding and the state apparently doesn't either. And, you know, we also want to prioritize this Highway 28 corridor. We want to get this done. So I'm not trying to make a change there, but I'm really glad she's raising the red flag, and please include me on those meetings with NDOT because Washoe, we put in our work to say this is what needs to be done. Time and effort has already been done. Community engagement was already done as part of this plan, and nothing is moving forward. I understand that frustration, certainly. All right.
Madam Chair,
yes.
If I may, as the TRPA governing board's representative on the TTD board, I'm happy to raise that at the next board meeting under member comments, just to elevate that and put that on the radar of the NDOT representative on the Tahoe Transportation District Board. And certainly, Nick is right. I mean, we have really a good working relationship with NDOT. I personally did a driving tour with the head of NDOT, Tracy Larkin Thomason, with the head of Caltrans, Dina El Tawansi, to foster that bi-state consultation around transportation. We talked about safety. We talked about the intersection where Highway 50 and 28 meet, where we've had some fatalities and collisions there, which is very dangerous, the entire corridor through Incline Village all the way to Crystal Bay. So it's on the radar and we'll accelerate that. Just wanted to let the committee know.
Yeah, there's near-term timeframes on many of these items in the transportation list. And yeah, I'm not really sure what that means anymore. What does near term mean? This plan was approved by my board in 2023, I think, and near term was 1 to 5 years. But Mr. Aguilar, do you have anything? Okay. Anyone online? Mr. Bass?
Yeah, thank you. Great to see these projects moving forward. I'm curious though, there was 13.4, I believe, is what was asked for in the grant program, and the one project didn't meet the scoring line. I'm curious though, was that 13.4 available if we had another project that would have met the score? And I'm just kind of not understanding, is that the amount that would have been available, but because the one project didn't meet it, we just only got the 11, I believe it was 11.4, excuse me. And then, yeah, if you follow what I'm saying.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Bass, for that question. No, we only had $11.4 million, no additional. So it was based on requested amount, scoring, in the ranking. So it would not have affected not funding that project.
I see. Okay. And then my other question, so in the city, we came together with Caltrans and did what was called a kind of a road safety audit, and it took a match from the city. I want to say it was around $750 to get them to initiate that, and that was more or less our match to Caltrans, and it has done. It's not completed, but it's adding a lot of pedestrian improvements, sidewalk improvements, a bike lane on. Have we looked into the other parts, at least here on the California side, at doing that with Caltrans in the areas of the counties in both Placer and El Dorado? I'm thinking on the 89 corridor. There's Myers. There's some different areas to consider. And have we looked at kind of the road safety audit path and making the match grant to Caltrans to make that happen?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Mr. Bass. Nick Haven for the record. Yes, we have actually done very well in terms of getting the road safety audits completed on the major highway segments around the basin in the California side. There's very few segments left, and those ones that are left have not kind of risen through our traffic, through the our safety planning hasn't risen to that critical need because resources are limited. But we will continue to always monitor that. And when a corridor that has not had a road safety audit and had some of those solutions identified raises via data, then we will definitely look at opportunities to partner with Caltrans to advance those.
Great. And Mr. Haven, so does it work where, I know if we're in the city, they did the audit and there was all these findings and then they did the improvements essentially. Is that how it works, or does it need to rise to a certain level under the audit for them to actually trigger the project? Or how do we initiate the project kind of when the audit has its findings?
Yeah, I think the follow-up on those findings is really about identifying those specific improvements and matching them with funding sources. The state of California, for instance, has Highway Safety Improvement Program, HSIP, which is their safety pot of money, and typically recommendations that elevate to recommendations in a road safety audit are then prioritized for those HSIP funds. So we make sure that that is followed through on. And we can obviously always augment those within our regional grant program cycles or any other funding sources that we have available to us.
Great, thank you.
Madam Chair, if I could build on that, this is Julie Reagan, TRPA's Executive Director. Just to amplify what Nick Haven just said, we've had the Secretary of CalSTA from the California Department of Transportation up in Tahoe multiple times over the last couple of years just to elevate these issues that we're all covering. And I wanted to echo Nick's answer to Mr. Bass. You know, the Emerald Bay pilot program that Board Member Lane and many of our board members over the years have worked on. But just this summer, the July 4th, peak congestion, peak safety concern timeframe, pinning the audit to that time took a lot of work. And so a big thank you to Board Member Lane for her leadership in pulling a multi-sector, multi-agency partnership together. The Tahoe Transportation District was really engaged and involved and led that work. So we do feel like we're getting a lot more attention from Caltrans, but we still have work to do because of speed limits going up in key corridors. And many of you have been working on those issues to not raise the speed, actually to lower. So there's still a lot to do, but we're really focused on it.
Mr. Bass, anything else?
Nope, I'm good to go. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, if there's no other comments from the committee, we can move because this was an informational item. So we'll go on to discussion and possible recommendation for approval of the 26 Regional Transportation Improvement Program, RTIP. This is item 5, page 109 of your packet, and we'll go back to the team.
Hi, so for the record, again, Judy Weber, TRPA Transportation Implementation. So next slide, please. So the State Transportation Improvement Program is a 5-year program of statewide transportation projects adopted by the California Transportation Commission every 2 years. This program allocates future funds of certain state transportation funds for state highways, local roads, intercity rail, active transportation, and transit improvements within California. Each cycle adds 2 new years of programming capacity. The STIP has 2 broad programs. First one is the regional program funded by 75% of the new STIP funding. And then the interregional program funded by 25% of these new STIP funds. The regional share is further subdivided by formula into county shares that are distributed to the regions for funding for the Regional Transportation Improvement Program. And then the interregional share is distributed to Caltrans. So the Regional Transportation Improvement Program, I'm going to refer to it as the RTIP, is the regional component of the STIP. These county shares are available to projects that are nominated by the regions only. The TRPA, as a regional transportation planning agency, receives the county shares and is responsible for preparing and adopting the program every 2 years. The RTP funds priority projects that are in the regional transportation plan. Next slide, please. So the 2026 STIP fund estimate includes 5 years, 2027 through 2031. TRPA's new target, net targeted share is $1,943,000. That's through 2031. And then we have a maximum share of $2.6 million through 2032. And these shares may be requested through the RTIP for the regional program. Today's action is proposing to program the maximum share of the $2.6 million to the South Tahoe Greenway Upper Truckee River Bridge at Johnson Meadow to fully fund the project through construction. Next slide, please. So as you just heard in the last presentation, the South Tahoe Greenway project is a priority project in the Regional Transportation Plan and in the TRPA Active Transportation Plan. It was funded through the Regional Grant Program. However, it has an unfunded need of about $2 million. Proposing these maximum STIP shares to the project will fully fund it through construction. Again, the project will extend the Greenway Trail, adding the 1.2 miles of shared use path. This will be from South Avenue in South Lake Tahoe, South Avenue over the Truckee River to Barber Avenue, linking to the Barton Hospital from the west and the Tahoe Sierra neighborhood and the Lake Community College to the east. You can see that on the map on the left-hand side here. And this is critical in removing bicyclists and pedestrians off Highway 50, putting them on a safer path to get in between these residential areas and businesses. So the project has been a priority since 2017 when the winter storms damaged the bridge, removing access across the river. You can see the bridge up in the upper right-hand corner. It's laden with snow, and then the photo below the disconnect there after the bridge was just washed out. So the project will provide a safe shared use path for active transportation users, again, over the river, linking to the residential and community areas and the existing network trail. Construction will begin on the project summer 2027 and be complete, summer 2027 and be completed summer 2028. So it's a 2-year season project. Next slide. So after today's action, December 15th, staff will submit the RTIP to Caltrans and the California Transportation Commission for inclusion into the 2026 STIP for approval. Next year, March 19th, the Transportation Commission is scheduled to adopt the 2026 STIP. And then after that, May or later, TRPA will, program the RTIP component into the Federal Transportation Improvement Program. And the FTIP action allows for the agency to proceed with the authorization of funds and the work to proceed. And next slide. So any comments or questions?
Thank you so much. Opening it up to the committee. Do we have any, Mr. Honeman?
I just like the disconnected euphemism for being washed away. I'm like, why was it disconnected? Oh, okay, that makes more sense. But that's great. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments in the room? Not seeing any. Mr. Bass.
I'm good to go.
Okay, well, this is actually an action item. So do we have any? We don't need to take public comment on this item? No? Okay, because we already.
It happened at the beginning.
Okay, I just want to make sure. Thank you so much. So if there's no other further comments, I'm looking for a motion for adoption of the resolution. Mr. Honeman.
So moved.
Thank you so much. We have a motion. Any other discussion from the committee? Hearing none, may I have a roll call vote?
Mr. Aguilar.
Yes.
Mr. Bass.
Yes.
Mr. Hennigan.
Yes.
Ms. Hill.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you so much. We're now moving into item 6. This is discussion and possible direction on updates to the transportation project impact assessment process, Code of Ordinances 65.2, and amendments to Chapter 7 of the Regional Plan Goals and Policies, Implementation Element, Development of Implementation Priorities 5.4. Information on this item can be found on 173 of your packet. And I think Mr. Segan is going to lead us into this. Hello.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, members of the committee, Dan Segan, TRPA staff. And it's my pleasure to present to you item number 6, also known probably more affectionately as the VMT item on your agenda today. Next slide, please. So I want to start with a little high-level overview of why we're having this discussion today, because it actually dates back to the compact and 45 years ago when the compact was amended. And when it was amended, we got specific direction from the federal government and the 2 states on what it was our transportation plan was supposed to do for the region. And one of the specific directions that we got was to reduce dependency on the automobile by making better use of other modes of transportation in our region. And it turns out VMT per capita is an incredibly good measure of how well each of us do at getting around our daily lives without using our automobile. So higher VMT per capita indicates that we're all more reliant on our automobile. We're driving farther to do the things we need to do. Lower VMT per capita means we're less reliant. We're taking transit more often, we're biking, and we're walking more often. Next slide, please. So this board in 2021 did three things to further our commitment to reducing VMT per capita and realizing that compact vision of reduced dependence on the automobile. So first, we adopted a new threshold standard in an entirely new category that memorialized our goal of reducing VMT per capita and its benefits to our community overall. Second, we modified our regional plan to ensure that there was an adaptive management framework that we could manage towards achieving that goal. And third, we updated our code of ordinances and how we analyze projects that come through the door to shift from analyzing just trips to considering how long each of those trips were, so that we'd favor development that was lower VMT per capita and is closer to the things that we want to do. Next slide, please. So after about 4 years of implementation, we're coming to you with 3 potential modifications to that system. And I'm going to go over each individually for you today. But I want you to think about, as you think about each of those individually, I want you to think about the broad outcomes that we are trying to achieve with these changes, because there's 3 of those as well. The first is we want more consistent and rapid project review. We've heard from applicants and staff here that the new way that we analyze projects is too time consuming, and it requires a lot of back and forth between applicants, consultants, lots of internal project review. And as we all know, time is money. So if we can smooth that process and deliver more consistent and reliable results, it's beneficial for all. Second, we want to ensure that the changes we make are supporting redevelopment. We've heard a lot of concern that the system as it is constructed today hinders or slows redevelopment that we know would be beneficial both to the VMT per capita threshold standard, but also to other threshold standards. And third, and finally, we're refocusing ourselves on the results of our system. This is a broad theme within the update of our threshold standards that we are moving from a focus on the inputs or the things we do on a day-to-day basis to the things that we really care about and want to see on the ground. Next slide, please. So the first of those 3 changes, and you can tell it's number 1 because there's a number 1 in the right-hand corner of your screen to orient yourself. So this is how we analyze projects, and we analyze projects and the VMT generated by projects through 2 really simple things. How many trips are going to be generated by that development, and how far are each of those trips going to be? So we, like many planning agencies around the country, use something called the ITE Trip Generation Manual, which is the Institute for Transportation Engineers manual of how many trips each different type of land use generates. And this manual is compiled from hundreds and hundreds of studies around the country and covers a variety of different land uses and it says basically, so they've done a suite of measurements and they say on average, how many trips are going in and out of the driveway of a multifamily home, a hotel, a resort hotel, a burger shop, a fast food place, a diner, a coffee shop. So we've got all of these rates, and they're used by project applicants and by us to determine how many trips. One of the central critiques of this manual is that it often relies on information that's gathered from really suburban development. Let's say, picture yourself somewhere in Ohio on a roadside in which your only access is driving in and out of that restaurant. And so the rates within the ITE Trip Generation Manual often overestimate what we would expect from development and overestimate what we see here in Tahoe from different development types. And so the process right now on a case-by-case basis, if you come to us, is we negotiate what we think the appropriate rate is for your development type. What we're proposing with these changes is to standardize that process and adopt a set of Tahoe-specific reduction rates based on the information from our travel demand model and the big data that we rely on to analyze our transportation system. And we would implement those changes and everyone would get the same reduced rates for their projects. And that you would take out this step of back and forth between us and the applicant haggling over what's the appropriate number for your project. That's the first change in project analysis. The second one, next slide, please, relates to the number of zones that we use to analyze projects. So our current set of zones is on the left-hand side of your screen, labeled current in the upper right-hand corner. And there are 80 zones within our region, which the feedback that we've received to date is that the zones are often confusing to both applicants and planners and split neighborhoods that would otherwise have like travel patterns. And so we're proposing a broad simplification of our zoning system that would use 3 zones within each jurisdiction. The first zone is zone red. Those are the areas with the shortest trip lengths. Second is the yellow zone, zone 2. It has the slightly longer trip lengths. And then the green areas are those areas that have the longest trip lengths within each jurisdiction. And again, to analyze the trip length within each of those, we'd summarize the existing data that we rely on into those new zones. Next slide, please. So the final part of our modification to how we analyze process relates to credit for projects. This is one of the things we were asked by the board to look at in prior meetings. And to orient you to existing policy, right now we have a 5-year inactivity window, whereby if you take over ownership of a property and want to open a business, if you reopen that business within 5 years, you get credit for prior VMT on that site, and that reduces your fees for that project. If you open after 5 years, you no longer receive that credit. And so you're paying the full mobility mitigation fee for that. One of the reasons that we, like other jurisdictions, have this 5-year window is to promote rapid redevelopment. So we don't want properties to sit vacant for long periods of time. So the 5-year window provides people with an incentive to go in and redevelop a property that's no longer in use. What we've heard through consultation is that is not always, it's not always possible to get a project on the ground or restarted within 5 years, and that we should reconsider that. And so internally, we've been brainstorming a number of ideas that look at options to extend or modify that 5-year period, from all the way a blanket from extending it to a 10-year period, to extend with credit depreciation over time. So you think there, you start at full credit. By year 7, you're down to 75% credit or 65% credit. The thought behind those, the depreciating credit, is that there's still more of an incentive to go faster. The goal here is to get those properties redeveloped, or to get them back in action and generating tax dollars to the local jurisdiction. We also want to promote infill development rather than greenfield development. So this is a benefit for promoting that type of development. Next slide, please. So the second part of the changes that we are proposing relate to project screening. So this is still within our project analysis process, but it relates to what we identify as a large project and what we identify as a smaller project. So within our system, we use screening to allow smaller projects, those that we don't think will have a regionally significant impact on VMT, to move through our system faster. So we say, oh, you're only 1 or 2 units, great, pay a fee and move forward. And if you are a larger project, then you're subject to additional review and potentially further requirements. So screening is this first stage in our analysis process. Next slide, please. So as we were developing ours, our new VMT-oriented project impact analysis assessment, so were many, many other jurisdictions. So this is a brand new way of evaluating projects. And after 5-6 years of implementation, there's a suite of lessons learned from those other jurisdictions that we think we should bring over locally. And they primarily relate to 2 things. One is screening more locally serving and public facilities. So one of the hiccups we've had here internally related to a CAL FIRE facility. that was potentially being looked at locating in a higher VMT area. And what we've learned from other jurisdictions is that they're not trying to locate that type of public serving facility. Think of this as, a fire, a police station. Based on its VMT, it should probably be located based on how it can best serve the public for the purpose that it's being designed. And that's what other jurisdictions have done. The same is true for small local serving retail. So Gavin mentioned it in his comments related to these smaller restaurants that don't generally generate new trips. What they do is they redistribute trips. So I open a new restaurant somewhere in town. Generally, you're not encouraging more people to go out to dinner. What happens is you just go to my restaurant instead of another restaurant. And so those are generally thought not to be generating new trips, and other jurisdictions have generally zoned or screened those out. So we're proposing those changes here. We're also proposing a broader screening within our town centers. So as you know, the town centers are the areas where we are most focusing our transportation infrastructure, and we're trying to create the density necessary to support that transportation infrastructure. And so what many other jurisdictions have done is said, you can build much larger within those areas and not be subject to the requirements. Ours, we are asking within that town center screening, there's an additional requirement that you complete our active mobility framework and you're designed consistent with providing access into and out of those places to ensure that you're aligned with our existing transportation infrastructure. Next slide, please. So finally, this is step 3, how we support our existing policy and how we promote attainment of that. So you'll remember that when we adopted the new VMT threshold, how we were going to fill the funding gap of the last RTP was front and central to how we were thinking about this. So we had a $20 million regional revenue source slotted in fiscal year 2026. And so everyone was looking forward and saying, okay, how do we fill that gap? How are we actually going to fund the projects that we need on the ground? And we've been fortunate that out of the Sustainable Funding Initiative, the 777 framework emerged, and the states, locals, feds have been incredibly successful in implementing that. So I think the last version of the accounting, we were $55 million ahead of where we thought we would be at this time. And that doesn't even include the last year of projects. That's just the first 2 years of implementation. So we're doing well on the funding policy. But as you all know from the 2 discussions we've had about this, there was numerous ambiguities within that policy, and the policy itself was written prior to the 777 framework. So you as a board directed us to go back and rethink that policy and its adaptive management responses to ensure that they're supporting the things that we want to support. And the recommendation that we're bringing forward to you today is that we shift the focus of that policy from one that's focused on dollars coming in the door to one that's actually focused on results on the ground. And part of the reason for that recommendation is that the RTP gap in funding was a broad funding gap. So it was not specific to VMT reducing policies within the RTP. It included everything that we do, from paving roads to everything. And so we're proposing a more narrow focus that measures the types of things that we were talking about on this earlier in the meeting. How well are the jurisdictions doing at implementing safety projects? Are we seeing the sidewalks constructed on the ground that we need in order to promote more bike ped activity and greater safety? And in areas where we're seeing those and where we see expanded transit service, the recommendation and the policy response would be to screen larger projects to encourage more development there. And in areas where we're seeing deterioration in the condition, where we're losing transit service and where we're not seeing those improvements, we would reduce the screening size, meaning that you would not be allowed to implement as large a project without further mitigation. And we think the benefit of that is that it both scales the response to what's happening on the ground and focuses more on the things that people actually care about. Because people don't generally care about how much the bike path costs you. They want to know that the bike path is there. They want to know that their transit service is there. We're the only ones focused on the total dollar amount of what we're buying. And so we're proposing a shift in that policy response to what is actually happening on the ground. Next slide, please. With that, I will open it up to all of you to dig into questions. And then just to orient you, the overall goal here is that we bring back a more robust and filled out policy framework for your consideration, likely in February of next year. So the action that we're looking for you today is a general direction that we are moving the right way with these discussions that we're having with stakeholders in designing that policy, and that we should bring back that more fleshed out policy in the future.
Thank you. Well, I'll open up to the committee. Mr. Honerman.
Every time. Great work. This is really interesting, exciting. I know we had asked to have this updated, so it's good to see that's happening. I was curious about two things. One, that the screening size would shift depending on what's happening on the ground. Does this include the process for how you analyze that and make adjustments to those things? Hopefully just telling us what you're doing instead of, it being some big structural thing that has to come back to the governing board to change every year, every 5 years, whatever the cycle is. So I'd just like to know a little bit more about how that works. And then the other one is, it was very controversial moving away from the funding, the big funding thing that was never determined how we were going to get it, to the 777 funding method. And I hope we can still put work and energy into figuring out a sustainable funding source especially for the transit operations moving forward, because I think we all know we're better at getting infrastructure dollars than operating dollars. And I think all of us would like to see more buses and pay for more bus drivers and hopefully electricity to move those buses around. So I guess I wanted to ask, if we're still pursuing that as an option and recommend that we do so. Thanks.
So I'll take the first of those related to the metric and how it relates to screening. So our current thought was that we would reevaluate the metric every 2 years and bring back how that would link back into the screening size. So it'd come to you and we would highlight. So we already have, as part of the other part of the adaptive management framework for this, we have a technical advisory committee that reviews our transportation measures report every couple of years and brings back recommendations to you on how to modify in response. So our thought was that we would integrate that into the pre-existing process and not spin off a new process so that you would get those changes as part of that. On the second one, how do we continue to work towards a sustainable funding strategy? So there's no specific funding strategy embedded within this proposal. The hope is similar to the motivation that was potentially provided by the existing structure, in terms of if we add more transit service, we'll get more. If we get more transit service, we'll get more. The hope is that the incentive structure within the proposal mirrors that intent, where the more transit service that's added in places, the more you reap the benefits of that. And if transit service is lost, then there are consequences for that. So it retains that existing structure. So the hope is that we would continue to work together as a partnership to find those types of solutions.
John, I want to
just a second. Mr. Honerman, I agree with your concern. We are seeing reduced microtransit on the North Shore come December. So I'm just curious, how are you going to be monitoring this because it's in flux, and we had federal funds that a lot of us were able to put towards these type of services, and now we cannot, and we're losing money actually in these type of services. So I'm with Mr. Honigman on the capital piece. Yes, that's obvious, but yeah, on the transit piece, it's really going to be tough to monitor on a project by project basis.
John Hester, I'd like to add to the response to your first question, which maybe also will a little bit address the second one, and I know Julie wants to follow. Getting into the nuts and bolts about, if you brought in a project that did not screen out, what we would do, we wouldn't bring that to you necessarily, but what we would do is unless it's a really big project and it meets those criteria, is we would say, you have to pay your fee. Our permitting department staff would say, you have to pay your fee, but you also have to go through this analysis and show us some other mitigation measures, like maybe you're going to put in some additional access to an area by trail, or you're going to fund some additional transit service or something like that. So that's what happens when you don't screen out. And so that is day to day the process. So we wouldn't want to slow things down significantly by bringing all those to you, but we would tell you every 2 years when we report how much that's happening and where. And one of the things that would happen when we bring that to you every 2 years is we would say, well, in these zones, these 3 zones, Incline Village, Washoe County, the transit service level has gone down. So we're going to lower the screening level down. And when projects come in that don't meet the screening level, we're going to take them through that additional analysis. And one of the things we'll say is microtransit is one of the reasons that no microtransit is one of the reasons that you have to go through this screening process. Maybe you want to help bring that back up. So that's the thought of how it all works together.
And so we would also charge the applicant potentially more that could be put towards microtransit.
We could charge more, or we could ask them to provide a project, funding source, or build a project, or buy a bus or microtransit vehicle, whatever mitigations we thought would help get that back up to where it was.
Great.
So
I guess my other comment was also telling the board that this is changing instead of it having to come to us to get approved. Like, this is a formulaic, this is what's going to happen. And, until we vote to change it.
I think what we're trying to do by simplification and focusing on the real outcomes we want instead of proxies is we're trying to make it happen administratively. When there's a policy change or periodic reports, we want to come to you, but we don't want everything to have to come to you. In fact, we don't even want to have to run through the screening process if somebody can just pay a fee. So that's kind of where we're going.
Madam Chair, thank you. Julie Reagan here, TRPA Director. Just to build on, I think those answers were well done. 2 quick points. One, wanted just to rewind back to the July board meeting when the governing board adopted the regional transportation plan. It was a lot of policies embedded in that plan, but of note, to speak to Mr. Heinigman's question, we have, for the first time in the history of us as an MPO doing a regional transportation plan, had a funding, think of that pie chart, where typically, the federal share is gigantic, the state is gigantic, and the local and private sector contributions are the smallest piece of the pie. Well, for the first time ever, the local and private sector slice is bigger than the federal government slice or the state slice. That is a direct result of this board's leadership, the 777 funding collaborative approach to get more work and local contributions to transit. And I agree with the chair. I mean, the transit operations is the hardest thing that we've done. But in the regional transportation plan, we elevated the need for more transit funding. We had our first pilot shuttles to Emerald Bay on the corridor. We're looking at new programs for recreation shuttles in those highly visited corridors like 28 and 89. And on the South Shore, we've got local contributions to transit hitting new levels. There's the work of the TBID, the Business Improvement District on the North Shore. That's up for another vote soon. We worked with partners to run legislation on the Nevada side for a similar business improvement district that would fund transit operations. Didn't make it across the finish line last session, but I know a lot of folks are working on that for next one. And we are tracking, on the big policy scale, the New York City congestion pricing. They just did a report this week of, they're projected to hit their financial, I think 500 million a year raised in congestion pricing, but the administration is still interested to shut that down. That took 10 years to get through the New York State legislature to allow congestion pricing in Manhattan. Our two governor's offices have not been supportive of a similar model for Tahoe, and that probably would require legislation. So all that being said, we said, let's actually link the policy to the outcomes we want. And we are making progress on that. Not to say that we're in danger of losing some funding, but writ large, as a region, we're making a lot more progress. And so we're really focused on it. And the policy work, I think that the board will be considering, as Dan said, in the first quarter of next year, really links not just the funding in the abstract, but actual metrics on the ground and linking performance and operational efficiencies in the way that we've encouraged through our standards and through our permitting work, more BMPs on the ground. Like, you cannot get a buoy or a pier without having your BMP, your best management practices, certified on your property. And so we're trying to link these policies in a way that's more meaningful. Just wanted to offer that perspective.
Thank you. Anything else, Mr. Honeyman? Okay. Do you have anything, Mr. Aguilar? Okay. Mr. Bass, do you have anything?
Yeah, no, this is great work to see. And I'm curious, when we look at kind of, the density that will be allowed based on the transit, are we making sure that the transit in place before we allow that density?
Dan Segan again. Yes, we are. And just to clarify the recommendation, we're not modifying the allowed density within any of those places. We are removing the VMT analysis from that part and just saying you can move forward faster within VMT and just pay your mobility mitigation fee and develop. So you're not subject to the additional analysis that would be necessary.
Great. And it's kind of a follow-up to the mobility mitigation fee. I've heard these new considerations, which I think are great, but I'm wondering, do we look at it being looked at like by each local jurisdiction? And then, because I think that when we look at this, there's individual properties that are unique and maybe the fee should be differently applied. And I know that there's some law around that we've got to equally apply a policy, but could we look at it jurisdiction by jurisdiction that essentially allows the jurisdiction to analyze what fits more for their jurisdiction compared to others, essentially? Because I think in South Lake Tahoe, we have much different dynamics than Washoe or Placer. And I'm just wondering, is that possible?
I can take a shot at that. The different zones, there's 3 zones for each jurisdiction. So to that degree, it would be South Lake Tahoe unique. To the degree you said, hey, we don't want you to charge a mobility mitigation fee, we'll supply some resources. You could do that if you wanted to, but you can't just say we're not going to pay it, because it's built into funding the regional transportation plan and the TIP. So you're absolutely right. I was just at the Board of Supervisors for Placer yesterday. Their T-bid puts money into transit. And I know that there was a bill to try to, one of the people pushing that bill is in the audience, was trying to do that on the Nevada side, and it didn't pass, but ultimately maybe it will. And then you could bring those kind of monies. If South Lake Tahoe had different sources, you could bring those to bear. We're all trying to get to the same place.
And my last question is, with our transit projects and the VMT reductions that they deliver, is that analysis happening so that we know, for instance, what Lake or Sart Connect on the North Shore, kind of what it has delivered in VMT reductions, and then so we know when we're reducing it, what we're going to lose. And I ask that as well because I think, I always bring up my gondola project because it's in the compact that we analyze a rapid transit system on the South Shore corridor. And I think that VMT reduction is massive if it were ever to be analyzed compared to what we would have to run, which is our, main line on Highway 50. But I'm just curious, I think it'd be great to see that correlation of VMT reduction to transit that we're delivering project by project so that we know what we're going to gain in VMT when we take it away.
That's something we can look into doing as part of the performance reporting. There are standard metrics, especially for fixed route transit and things like a gondola or a train, that estimate VMT reduction based on ridership. It's much harder within the micro transit framework, and it's more subject to variability based on the methods used.
And for me, I mean, I think I was part of the team that said, like, let's look at this more strategically, and, break it down so we make sure that we're giving credit to local jurisdictions who are making the investments. And so I appreciate the change. I guess now I'm like, I'm worried, just to be perfectly frank, that if there's not more pressure put on the state of Nevada, are we ever going to find regional funding for transit? So I do think that hearing from the league, they have legitimate concerns on that too. But if you're saying you can adequately measure if microtransit is reduced or any of these other programs are reduced, and we do it on a project by project basis, perhaps that will create pressure by developers talking to the state of Nevada of, please make these investments. But that's where I guess seeing the realities of on the ground of where we are financially as a state, and what the struggles we're having on finding these funding sources. I'm curious, how do you think this will play out? Just give me an example of a project and how it will play out with we've reduced our microtransit on the North Shore, and how will this play out?
So maybe I'll go back to the first part of your question that you asked before, which was how are we going to measure these things? So the way that we've constructed the index today is that we rely on the information that we already have from each of the three elements of this. So for transit, we're using microtransit frequency and number of vehicle service hours. We're using transit, using the routes and the number of stops at each route. For the bike and ped infrastructure, we've got a suite of safety measures that we use that include things like bike stress of navigating from here to there, sidewalk availability, bike lane availability. And then finally, on the land use side, we have the density of structures. So the way that it plays out with a change in any one of those, and I'll be perfectly frank, we haven't worked out the full equation. I think that Vince asked for.
Yeah.
We're looking for the head nod, I think, from you first before we get to the nuts and bolts. But I think what you can imagine is if an area loses microtransit service that has it today, or loses a transit stop, or loses frequency within that stop, let's say its score goes down by 10%. And you'd have a corresponding or a corresponding decrease in the size of projects that could screen within that area. So if previously you could screen a 10,000 square foot restaurant, now you'd only be allowed to screen a 9,000 square foot restaurant. So the size of development that is allowed and not subject to further analysis is reduced in a corresponding manner to the amount that the index has been reduced at that site. And if that service is restored, and those goes on a 2-year basis. So it's not going to be something that like a developer comes in the door and says, what's the score today? Transportation changes slowly over time, just like our land use projects. We'd be doing this every 2 or every 4 years, and we would post the revised screening levels for each of those areas. So the developers would know in advance that this is going the right direction. I'm now allowed 11,000 square feet here and not being subject to screening at that project size. So the idea, it's very similar to the existing construction of the we have a milestone for fundraising. And if that's met, it becomes easier to implement projects. This is a broader based measure that's focused more on what's actually on the ground rather than the money that we've got in hand, and then distributes the incentives and disincentives of that throughout the landscape in a way that, as you mentioned, rewards jurisdictions that are doing the right thing and areas where we're seeing progress, which is not just to further incentivize them, actually rewarding them and encouraging larger projects there centralizes our development in the areas that we think it's most likely to further reduce VMT per capita. Where in those areas that are losing transit services or losing other things, or if they're losing density, if you rip down, a multifamily and you just build a single story, you're losing that density that's required to support our system. And so you're going to be subject to additional analysis for a larger project.
Okay. And then I don't think we've given you any direction on the 5-year credit piece. So I'm not sure if anyone has a thought on that. I'm a little confused on the 3 or 4 options on how differently they incentivize quick development turnaround. So maybe a little bit more info on that, unless there's strong opinions from the committee. Go ahead, Mr. Bassett.
I definitely think the 5-year window for me, it seems too short. I go to the building that was Chevy's here in town, and it has gone well over probably the 10-year at this point. But 5 years, the building definitely needs some rehab. It could definitely use to be, let's say, refitted from the front, or better aesthetics and those kind of things. But it has stopped people and tenants from moving into that building. And so that 5-year window really has brought it now into a vacancy level of 10 years, because it was, I think, $65,000 for just a mitigation fee, just for tenants to move in the building and open a new business. And I think that 5-year window is too short. I think we need to move that to at least 10 years. And so we don't end up with more blight and more vacant buildings along our corridor, because for somebody trying to open a new business, adding 65 grand onto what you already have a huge build out cost, you already have a lot of cost. And so are we mitigating, or are we adding more blight, in a sense, is how I see it. So I'd like to see us consider a longer window.
And Mr. Honigman.
Yeah, I think also just the up and down cycle, business cycle, makes it really hard, because you get these times like we're in now where it's almost impossible to do anything, and they last at least 5 years. So I'm fine increasing. I think Gavin said that the league supported option 4, which was actually surprising because it seems the most lenient almost. But so I'm happy to see that, and I like that it differentiates between town centers and downtown centers, because I think we really want to incentivize everything going into town centers and not make as many concessions for outside. So I think that's a great policy.
Okay.
I appreciate that direction. I apologize for not framing the policy question more succinctly there, because I think there's 2 dimensions that we've been debating internally. One is, should there be a geographic incentive or geographic disincentive or geographic element of the policy? So it adds a little complexity to offer additional benefits within town centers. But as Vince noted, that is more in line with the regional plan overall. And the second is, what's the committee's feeling on the notion of credit depreciation, and if that offers an additional incentive, versus whether or not we should just extend to a period of time and expire again.
And I'm hearing that we're not interested in depreciation. We're interested in the more flexible approach.
I mean, maybe after 10 years, after a longer period or something. I mean, if a building's vacant for 10 years, there's multiple problems there, probably. There's some ownership issues going on there that we should probably penalize.
I want to, just from experience, and I know Chair will know this, is it's 10 years for the RTC Washoe, and period. Keep it simple. There is a geographic component for redevelopment areas, which they allow 20. So you could say you want to do that in town centers, but you also run the risk of saying, oh, I have no incentive to redevelop now because I got 20 years. I can let this thing. So it's a fine line. As we've talked about that. So.
Go ahead.
Yeah, maybe we don't want to give people forever, because so many of these properties get owned by family trusts with 20 different family members and they can't agree on anything. And we need a little fire under them to make something happen. And 10 years is a huge long blight, but at least it kind of smooths out some of the economic cycles that, so what do you, is the consensus kind of 10 years in town centers, keep 5 years out of town centers? Is that?
That's what I'm hearing in this, Mr. Bass.
Yeah, no, I'm okay about that. I think within South Lake, I mean, that covers the majority of South Lake in essence. So we're covered.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm okay with that. I do think that the 5 years is still a little outside of non-town centers, only because, again, do we want somebody to just continue not renting because of that fee, even though they're not directly in the town center? I do like the idea that it incentivizes more of the, let's say, new businesses and tenants to move in at town centers. That promotes so many of other goals of ours. So I can go along with it because it is part of our regional plan. So it makes sense.
Okay, we can see it. That works. Yes.
Madam Chair, Julie Reagan here. Just really appreciate this discussion. It's exactly what we were looking for to move forward and bring something back to you that's even refined further. I did want to thank all the stakeholders that we've engaged with. This is a hideously complicated and technical policy matter. And Dan Segan did an amazing job in trying to scale that up so that you could have the kind of meaningful discussion that we were looking for. So great job to Dan and to the whole team. We have a whole team of people at the agency, our transportation team, planning team, John Hester working on it. But I did want to underscore what Member Henigman said, and that is we are trying to align this policy with our regional plan to drive the investment in our town centers and compact development that's more walkable and bikeable, and link these policies together, because the regional plan of 2012 wanted to see more environmental redevelopment, good redevelopment, infill development that delivers more environmental benefits, including transit support. So it's been our level, we've done our level best to marry these policies together. And I do appreciate the California Attorney General's office who commented, the League to Save Lake Tahoe, many other stakeholders that have been guiding us along the way, and we'll commit to go back and to keep working on this to bring you something in the first quarter of next year.
Great. And the one thing, did we give you direction on screening? I think we gave you direction on all these pieces, except did we give you the direction that you needed on screening as well?
I don't know if there was any further.
There wasn't any. Okay, we're good. Anything else? All right. Then we're good.
I think we've got a motion.
All right. Sure.
One more question. When we're saying town centers, are those aligned with your tier 1, 2, 3 VMT areas, or is it the regional plan definitions of town centers, things like
Regional plan definition?
Okay, so it's even more restrictive than.
It is more restrictive than the zone 1, zone 2, zone 3.
Okay.
The town centers are too small for us to analyze VMT impacts, many of them on their own. So we tried to, when we were developing the zones, we used the planning districts from each local jurisdiction and aggregated those to areas that roughly had similar VMT generation patterns and trip patterns.
Yeah, no, I was just curious about the screening and that part of it, if those two were aligned but they are different in their geographies. Okay.
Sure, I'll put forward a motion to
Great.
direct staff to continue working with stakeholders to fully develop the outline in this staff report and its attachments.
Thank you so much. And do we need a roll call vote since we're all here? Yes. Okay, may I have a roll call vote?
Mr. Aguilar? Mr. Bass?
Yes.
Mr. Henigman?
Yes.
Ms. Hill?
Yes.
Madam Chair, that motion passes.
Thank you so much. We'll now move to committee member comments. And are there any committee member comments? Not seeing any. Great. We'll now move to our final public interest comments. Any member of the public wishing to address the Transportation Committee on this item or other items can do so at this time. And individual or groups who have already commented on items listed on the agenda are not permitted to comment on that same topic. The Transportation Committee can only deliberate on action items listed on the agenda. To ensure proper notice, committee members typically won't respond to comments and ask for staff to respond for clarification or request a topic to be put on a future agenda. Finally, comments must relate to matters within the jurisdiction of the agency. If any member wishes to speak at this time, please raise your hand in the room. I'm not seeing any folks in the room. All right. And if you want to speak online, raise your hand on the bottom of your Zoom screen, dialing *9 on your phone. You'll be called on and unmuted by a TRPA staff member. Madam Clerk, is there anyone online?
Madam Chair, we have 3 hands raised so far.
Thank you.
Helen Neff, please go ahead and address the committee.
I just want to say thank you to Chair Hill, Director Reagan, and this committee and the TRPA staff for your earlier comments supporting the safety of Incline Village on State Route 28. I know I can't repeat my comments. I'm not going to. It's a week before Thanksgiving. I just wanted to say thank you, as I would prefer to stop complaining and start celebrating safety. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next hand raised is Ellie Waller. Please go ahead, Ellie.
We can't hear you, Ms. Waller.
Ellie?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, we can.
Okay, Ellie Waller. I'm a Douglas County resident, former county resident of Placer County. I care about the entire lake. It was mentioned that the 777 plan isn't panning out. Does TRPA have a future agenda item to discuss and clarify what they expect going forward in proposing that in future legislations in both states? Thank you.
Thank you.
Next hand raised is Nick Spiel. Nick, go ahead and address the committee.
Hello, this is Nick Spiel. I just wanted to comment briefly on the relatively new meeting format. It is kind of nice to have the opportunity to comment at the beginning of the meeting. For sometimes you don't have all day to wait around, or you don't really know when to leave a comment, so that is nice. But it is kind of a little unfortunate sometimes to hear a discussion and not be able to leave a comment in the context of that discussion. So I just wanted to ask if it might be possible to have either option, either comment at the beginning of the meeting or at the agenda time. Only one, probably not both. That would be able to, then we'd be able to leave comment in context. A couple really brief comments is just a thank you for supporting the Johnson Meadow Greenway Bridge project. I think this is one of the most important bike infrastructure projects in the basin, and it's going to be really great. And regarding your discussion on VMT fees in town centers, I would like it if you could consider broadening the definition of town center there to any area within walking distance of transit. Thinking about South Lake Tahoe, for example, I think encouraging redevelopment anywhere along the Highway 50 corridor is roughly equivalent in terms of the VMT impact. And I think it'd be really great to have more businesses close to a bus stop, right? There's a lot of bus stops in the middle of town. You could have a business right next door to that with low VMT impact, even if it's not technically in a town center. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, there are no other hands raised to make public comment.
Thank you so much. On Ms. Waller's comments, do we have any comments by staff? I'm sure we do. Okay. All right. Well, thank you everyone for a wonderful meeting. It is 11:05 and we are adjourned.